a suffragist. Not perhaps the most well-known suffragist, but a suffragist nonetheless. She wasn't the most conservative women's rights activist either. During her stay in England, she was known as a heckler and a window breaker. But in her time in the U.S., she picketed the White House and was imprisoned, along with other suffragists, for obstructing traffic. But it was during her 3 imprisonments, and because of them in the U.S., that she gained the ear of the press, public, and a few politicians. Alice Paul may have been the straw that broke the male camel's back and caused women to gain the right to vote. She may not have been the straw, but she was a straw nonetheless, and every straw counts. Born in 1883, Alice grew up a Hicksite Quaker on her parents' farm in New Jersey. Hicksite Quakers believe in the equality of the sexes, so even from a young age, Alice was being taught the values that she would one day fight to see become a reality for all women. She even attended a Quaker college where she achieved her bachelor's degree in biology. She was even taught by some of the leading women professors of the time. And in 1907, she moved to Birmingham, England to study social work at the Woodbrook Settlement. And it was here that she was first introduced to the militant suffrage movement. One day, she was walking the streets. She saw a woman trying to speak out about women's rights. To so much jeering and angry shouts from the crowd that she was forced from her stage. Alice Paul went to introduce herself to the woman and discovered that she had just seen Christabel Pankhurst in action. Christabel was one of 2 daughters of what was perhaps England's most radical suffragist, Emmeline Pankhurst. The trio immediately took Paul under their wing and began teaching her the ways of the radical suffragist. They heckled, broke windows, and threw rocks, all in the name of women's rights. They were also arrested and imprisoned on several occasions, which they protested by going on hunger strikes. Alice Paul, all in all, by the end of her England stay, had broken over 48 windows and was imprisoned and arrested on several occasions. When she returned to the States in 1910, she brought this same mindset back with her. And while she didn't break any windows, her tactics were almost as harsh. She became the chair of Congressional Committee for the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or NAWSA. But after only a year there, she and her close friend Lucy Burns left to establish their own party. She and Lucy thought that things were not going fast enough, so they created the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage, which later became the National Women's Party, or the NWP. The NWP would hold parades which would boldly proclaim women's rights. These parades usually ended in violence and angry mobs, but perhaps the most attention-getting thing that they ever did was to picket the White House. The NWP would hold silent centennials, where they would hold up banners with phrases directed at President Wilson. At first, Mr. Wilson would simply tip his hat, bemused at the banners that read, "How long will women have to wait for freedom?" However, his tune quickly changed when the banners became Kaiser Wilson, among other unpatriotic things, as the U.S. entered the First World War. The picketers were attacked by angry mobs, arrested on the trumped-up charge of obstructing traffic, and were imprisoned when they refused to pay bail. The picketers were taken to the Copeland Workhouse in Virginia, where conditions for the suffragists were, quite frankly, terrible. The women, including frail older suffragists, were beaten and then thrown or pushed into cold, unsanitary, and rat-infested cells. They protested their conditions by going on hunger strikes, and after a short while, the prison staff had to move Paul and several others into the psychiatric ward, where they forced tubes down the ladies' throats and poured liquids into the tubes just to keep them alive. But no matter how much pain or sickness that the tube feeding caused them, these women would not give up their strikes until they were freed. When the public and press first became aware of the conditions at this prison, they immediately raised such cane that Alice and her friends were freed, and many of them joined their cause just because of their story. And it was because of the public's outcry for the conditions at Occoquan that President Wilson announced his support for a suffrage amendment. On August 26, 1920, the United States Congress ratified the 19th Amendment, the amendment that allowed women the right to vote. Alice Paul was a part of this great movement. It was a battle that took over 72 years and several generations to win. Alice Paul was a leader even in this movement, and although her life was not a grand one, it wasn't filled with the rich or posh things that a wealthy woman would have, or with the attention of a superstar. It still made a difference. And because of Alice Paul and her determination and the fear of utter failure, even death, I can vote today. And she has also affected the lives of every single American woman and girl in this nation.